Welcome back, everybody, to yet another tier maker. This time for the set 3 leaders and how I rank them as Twin Sun partners. We're just going to hop straight into this one, starting off with Nalase. I rank her as an A for the fact that you can just slam all the clones in the game into the Twin Suns deck, which is going to be kind of important. Come next set, the deck minimum comes up to 80. They printed a lot of clones in set 3. So that aspect, that trait is going to be pretty important. And also, she just has a lot of benefits to her. You know, you compare her with like exploit leaders and stuff like that, and just really pop off with healing, cost reduction, stuff like that. The downside is that her front side just does nothing, just ignoring the aspect penalty on clones. She does deploy on 4, but she is a 1/7, so she's got a lot of life to her, but a simple removal will just end that really quick. So there is that risk that you take with her. But overall, she's just very flexible and just an all-around good leader, in my opinion. Next up is Wat Tambar. This is action exhaust. If a friendly unit was defeated this phase, give a unit +2/+2 for this phase. Flips on 5, which is pretty solid. 3/6 on attack. If a friendly unit was defeated this phase, you may give another unit +2/+2 for this phase. That's very solid. I also rank him as an A just because that's still kind of a very generic-ish leader, especially with the separatist tag on it. You know, if you're playing very control-y and throwing your things in other people's things, or if they're trying to blow your stuff up to kind of prevent you from popping off, like Tumbar is going to give you some extra boost, and just being a 3/6 on 5 is pretty solid. So I really like him as another generic leader. He's also green. We know how strong green is, especially green villainy. Next up, we have Captain Rex, who is action, pay 2, exhaust. If a friendly unit attacked this phase, create a clone trooper token, deploys on 5, and has a 2/6. That when deployed, you create a clone trooper token, and each other friendly trooper unit gets +0/+1. For Captain Rex, I have him as a B. I'm not overly fascinated with his deployed side. Um, it doesn't do anything else. I mean, a 2/6 on 5 is okay, but like you just got Tambar that is a 3/6, and then of course you got Boba that's a 4/7. Captain Rex, yes, he does create a clone trooper token, so I guess it's like flip on 5, get a 2/6 and a 2/2, and then pretty much kind of immediately get your coordinates online by playing the next card. So I guess there is that, but outside of that, just the life buff is okay, but I don't think it's like a game changer in Twin Suns. If it was a +1 power, that'd be a whole different ball game, and a bigger swing in the game compared to just the HP. Next up, we have Previsla, who says action pay 1 exhaust, deal damage to a unit equal to the number of cards you've drawn this phase. Does not include cards drawn in the regroup phase. Deploys on 5 and is a 4/6. So a better solid stat line than Captain Rex, in my opinion. Uh, while you have 3 or more cards in your hand, this unit gains Saboteur or Saboteur. While you have 6 or more cards in your hand, this unit gets +2/+0. I have Previsla as an S tier. Just because again he's kind of relatively generic. 4/6 is pretty solid on 5. We see what Boba has done with that 4 power, and him being at 6 HP takes it out of takedown range and all that jazz. So pretty solid, pretty generic. He's in the red color, which wants to draw cards. I mean, we now got to draw 3. We've got to draw 2 card and whatnot. Pair him with like a green leader, and like you can draw even more cards. Like pretty solid, pretty generic, and then the front side just being able to deal damage equal to the amount of cards that you've drawn. It's very solid. I love them. Next up is Newt Gunray, who says action exhaust. If 2 or more friendly units were defeated this phase, create a battle droid token. He deploys on 6 and is a 2/8 with an on attack. Create a battle droid token. Excuse me, getting over being sick. For Newt Gunray, I also have him as a B. I think he's nice. I think he's very limited to more of the separatist exploit decks. Because more than likely, not 2 of your units are going to get defeated in one turn. As easily. Like especially if I'm sitting across from somebody that's playing Newt, I don't know if I would just attack into their things or try to defeat their things. But I mean, just getting a battle droid back in return for it, so it's like, I guess it's also not too bad of a drawback if I defeat a Newt's unit or 2 units, and then the best that they get back is a 1/1 battle droid. I guess that's not a bad trade-off in my eyes, I guess. So I overall don't really like this leader. I would probably put him more in the C just because I don't think that he's great. But I can also see the potential of him popping off in the exploit decks. So that's where I'm at with the Newt. Next up, I have Mr. Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is action exhaust, heal 1 damage from a unit, deploys on 6, and is a 4/7 with Sentinel. And on attack, you heal 1 damage from a unit. If you do, you deal 1 damage to a unit. I have Obi-Wan as an A. Just being able to deploy on 6, having a solid stat line of a 4/7, very solid. Being Sentinel, turn 6 resources is kind of right about where the end game seems to be for at least our games and whatnot. Sometimes we get the 7, but man, having a 7 HP Sentinel out right there on the back end of the game is just, it's insane. His front side's kind of okay. It is nice in one leader pairing that I'm thinking of for him that I'm sure a lot of people should already know. Uh, it, it's very solid in the end game for Obi-Wan. He's very good, very generic. Next up we have Mr. Yoda, who for me I have as an S tier. He's an action exhaust. If a unit left play this phase, draw a card, then put a card from your hand on top or bottom of your deck. So what I really like about Yoda is the fact that it's any unit. It doesn't have to be yours. It doesn't specifically have to be an opponent's. It's just any unit that has left play. You just get to exhaust him and draw a card. Now, if nobody wants to do anything about each other's units, then obviously Yoda just does nothing. And there is a drawback that he doesn't come out until 7, so you might actually need the ramping to be able to get there, or you need to try and actually build a more control style deck around Yoda to try and make sure that the games don't end before you bring out Yoda. That has happened plenty of times in our games where we played a 7 resource leader, didn't even get to deploy him. But if you do, he's a 4/9, so pretty solid for a 7 with Restore 2, which we know how cracked that is, thanks to Rey. And when deployed, you may discard a card from your deck. If you do, defeat an enemy non-leader unit that costs the same as or less than the discarded card. I mean that on deploy, it is what it is. It would be a feel bad if you discarded a 1 cost. So I mean, backside wise, isn't that great. 4/9 on 7, you probably would prefer a 5/8 at that point with Restore 2. But still, just the draw power potential in Yoda is potentially insane. That's where I'm at with Pre Vizsla. Pre Vizsla wants to draw cards, so like you're building draw power decks, which historically is like very good to be doing in such a format like Twin Suns. Next up, we have Count Dooku. His action, exhaust, play a separatist card from your hand. It gains exploit 1, flips on 7, but he's in green, so you're going to always run that ramp. He is a 5/9. See, it's where you kind of want Yoda to be, but the Restore 2 is pretty nice. With Overwhelm and on attack, the next separatist card you play this phase gains exploit 3. So, unfortunately, like I said, the games typically end when you're at 6 to 7 resources. So, the exploit 3 is only going to come in or like 1 time. or it may not even come in at all. So that is always the possibility. Uh, so obviously he's a themed leader, and for me, that's always going to get a bump down. For me, the themed leaders will never, even though technically I guess Previsla is a theme, also draw cards, but like type leaders are instantly not an S tier because like there's one specific structure of type of cards that it wants to run, so you can't just go parent it wherever. Um, I guess you kind of could because of how loose the game is relatively, but there's a theme that you're playing off of, and if you don't play that theme, the Duke is not uh, as good. So that's why he's an A tier. Although other than that, being able to have cost reduction is just always good. So, and I think exploit is kind of crazy in Twin Suns. Next up is Padme Amidala. She has coordinate, action, pay 1, exhaust, search the top 3 cards of your deck for a Republic card, reveal it, and draw it. She deploys on 5 and is a 2/7 with restore 1. So not bad, not great, but not bad. Essentially, it's like the same stat line as Ray. Well, Ray restores 3, but she has coordinate on attack. Search the top 3 cards of your deck for a Republic card, reveal it, and draw it. So once again, another draw power leader, but again, she's only on theme for one trait, which is why she gets the A, because obviously you want to be able to hit on that ability every single time, so you don't want to mesh with other leaders that's going to require non-Republic cards and whatnot, or otherwise you may not hit on her ability and it just might become a feel bad. The coordinate also for me is also going to be a bump down just because you got to have the 3 units out. If your board is controlled, like there's just nothing that you can really do, and she's just a 2/7 with restore 1. So I like her as a leader, but not as an S tier. Next up is Darth Maul. Sorry, Maul. Action, exhaust, attack with a unit, it gains overwhelm for this attack, deploys on 6 and is a 6/6. Crazy solid stats. With overwhelm, and each other friendly unit gains overwhelm. For Maul, I've got him as an S tier. He's just an overall, again, another generic leader that you can kind of just pair with anybody. It'll work. You can pair him with the themed leaders. It'll work. You'll just have to change the style up and attack other people's boards. Gain the overwhelm, so that way you can sit there and not only defeat their units, but also still deal damage to their base. And just a 6/6 on 6 is just insane for the end game. Slap any lightsaber on him, and he's probably defeating someone. So that's insane. Next up is Ahsoka Tano. Ahsoka has coordinate, action, exhaust, attack with a unit. It gets +1/+0 for this attack. She deploys on 5 and is a 3/6 with coordinate. This unit gets +2/+0. So potential 5/6 on 5, which to me is pretty insane. I have her as an A. I know there's an argument to be made that she should be an S tier because she is relatively generic. She's not tied to anything. So just being able to get a 5/6 on 5 and be like very aggressive towards the end game is nice, but again, that coordinate ability, you gotta have the 3 units out. If for some odd reason somebody just immediately takes you down to 2 units, then she's just a 3/6 that does nothing else until you get that 3rd unit back out. So it just, I don't know. Coordinate feels okay. It's still iffy about it on leaders just because that early game you just kind of do nothing until you're at that 3 unit thing. So next up is Anakin Skywalker, who has action, exhaust, deal 2 damage to your base, attack with a unit. If it's attacking a unit, it gets +2/+0. I really wish that Maul was a heroism just to pair with Anakin. Then I think that 2 pairing would be lights out. Just being able to kind of be able to give something overwhelm, and then use Anakin to be able to attack with it to give it a +2 buff. I mean, if Anakin is in the pod, expect an aggressive game because they're dealing damage to themselves. So they're not looking to take their foot off the pedal. Like they're all gas, no brakes. You better expect a quick game. Like he may not even see the board, depending on how aggressive. But I can promise you, it's not going beyond that 6 resources. So for me, I have him as a B, just because there is that aggressiveness. It's all gas, no brakes with Anakin. That's the route you go. All gas, no brakes, or he just kind of does nothing for you until you deploy him in the late game, and then he just becomes cracked. Because if you're at 20 damage on base, well, now he is a 8/7 on 6. So he could potentially just one shot somebody to end the game and heal you 5. So he could probably be an A. That front side in Twin Suns for me isn't that impressive. Isn't that impressive unless you're running a bunch of overwhelmed cards, which I don't think that we have enough of, and we're not going to have enough of for multiple sets, since again the minimum goes up to 80. Next up is Mace Windu. Mace Windu. Action: pay 1, exhaust, deal 1 damage to a damaged enemy unit. Then, if it has 5 or more damage on it, deal 1 damage to it. He deploys on 7 and is a 5/8, and he has, when deployed, deal 2 damage to each damaged enemy unit. I'm not big on him even in standard or the constructive format. I'm not big on him here. I mean, the fact that it's got to be an already damaged unit, which should be easier in Twin Suns, but paying 1 to deal 1 damage to a unit that's already damaged and then potentially deal it 2 damage if it's got 5 or more, that's very situational, and it kind of feels bad when you've got other leaders that just kind of ping. I mean, you got Vader that deals 1 damage to a unit and to a base. Granted, you got to play a villainy leader or a villainy card, and then you've got Bo-Katan that has to just attack with a Mandalorian. You've got Quinlan Voss that just requires you to play a card, but with also some restriction. But like the restriction is just not as bad as like Mace. Mace is just insane. And then the fact that his deployed leader side just kind of does nothing, because if you deploy him and nothing has damage on it, then you just deployed a 5/7 on turn with at 7 resources. So not big on him at all. Next up is Asajj Ventress. A lot of hype for her in constructed. I don't really know about Twin Suns. Like Twin Suns is aggro, but the issue is for her being at a 3/4, super squishy, super squishy. People are probably going to take care of that before you even get the chance to do anything with her. You would have to orchestrate it in a way to where you can at least get 1 swing and 1 big swing with her before someone just claps back and defeats her. It's a leader that you're not going to want to see stick on the board, because she's going to bring the aggro and she's going to be big. And she's going to end the game very quickly if somebody doesn't answer her. I didn't even read what she does. So she has action, exhaust, attack with a unit. If you played an event this phase, it gets +1/+0 for this attack. She deploys on 4, like Sabine, and is a 3/4 with on attack. If you played an event this phase, this unit gets +1/+0 for this attack and deals combat damage before the defender. Obviously, you're not going to use Asajj to attack into anybody. Asajj is going to base. You don't give her those kind of stats and think that you're just going to use her to attack people. Maybe if she had 7 HP or 6 HP, you probably would, but 4 HP, nah, you might. That's too squishy. You're just going to throw her into base, try and pump her as much as you can, and get in a good swing. But unfortunately, I think that's a lot harder to do than in constructed. So that's why I got her as a C. I really want her to be a B. I really want her to be an A, but she's a little bit harder to pull off because aggro will get halted quick. So next up we have good old General Grievous, whose action exhaust, give a droid unit Sentinel for this phase, deploys on 6 and is a 4/8, so pretty solid. On attack, you may give a droid unit +1/+0 and Sentinel for this phase. So again, he's a very themed based leader, so it's an A. I think overall what he does is nice. The fact that he's a 4/8 on 6 is pretty good. It's right there with Cat Bane. And then just being able to give Sentinel, like that's very nice at every single turn, as long as you're playing a droid themed deck, that you could sit there and keep giving yourself Sentinel and protecting yourself a little bit more. If you can get some big daddy droids out there via exploit with like eight HP, so that way, if they try to swing into you, they're gonna have to probably take a couple of swings to be able to defeat that unit. Obviously, if you don't get to go first, then that's their window of opportunity to kind of deal some damage to you. So overall, I like him. I really wish he could be an S, but themes, man, themes. Next up is Jango Fett. He says when a friendly unit deals damage to an enemy unit, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, exhaust that enemy unit. He deploys on 5, like his son, except he's a 3/7. With when a friendly unit deals damage to an enemy unit, you may exhaust that unit. He is insane. I have him as an S tier, more for the deployed side. Now the front side, you can only do one card at a time. But if he's deployed and you have him protected and whatnot, every little damage that you do, you exhaust everything. So if you did an OB and dealt 1 damage to everything on the board, you just exhausted everything, leaders and all. So that's pretty insane control there. And I know people are going to sit there and build a control deck around him, and he's just going to be a leader that's in it for the long run. Next up, we have Quillen Voss. I wasn't big on this leader when it got spoiled, but apparently he's getting more and more hype in the constructive format, so maybe there is potential for Quillen Voss in the Twin Suns format as well. So I probably didn't give him a fair ranking. So I initially gave him a C because I was like, it's not that great. But based on how everybody else is kind of treating him, which granted it's a little bit harder, Twin Suns, because you got 3 opponents. So, dealing 1 damage to an enemy unit out of 3 opponents kind of doesn't really matter as much as in constructed when it's 1v1. But at least you have more options. So I'll go ahead and give him the bump up to a B. He still does deploy on... So he's got, when you play a unit, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, deal 1 damage to an enemy unit that costs the same as the played unit. And then he deploys on 5 and is a 3/7, so pretty standard now. When you play a unit, you may deal 1 damage to an enemy unit that costs the same as or less than the played unit. The part that I didn't take into account is that when he's deployed, that ability triggers for every single unit that you play. Now, if you somehow are able to keep playing like 3 cost, then you could sit there and keep pinging a 3 cost, unit on an enemy's board and whatnot. So that is pretty cool. Again, just being a 3/7 on 5 is pretty solid. So I'll give him that little bump up, especially since he's in Cunning. There's so many ways that you could just immediately buff him and get in a big swing. 7 HP, kind of difficult to kill, so pretty solid. Last but not least, we have the new Chancellor Palpatine / Darth Sidious leader. I initially had him as an S tier, probably as an S plus tier, until the ruling came out that only the side that he is facing up is the side that counts towards the aspect. So if he's on his heroism side and you've got a handful of villainy cards, you're paying that tax unless you can somehow get a heroism card onto the board and have it be defeated. So that way you can use his ability to flip him, which I didn't even read his ability. I'm slacking. he says this leader starts the game with this side face up, the heroism cunning side. Action exhaust. If a friendly heroism unit was defeated this phase, draw a card, heal 2 from your base, then flip this leader. And he flips into Darth Sidious, who is a cunning villain with action exhaust. If you played a villainy card this phase, create a clone trooper token, deal 2 damage to each enemy base, then flip this leader over. So you gotta really be able to balance out that heroism and that villainy, so that way you don't end up in an awkward spot. And I'm very curious how that'll be. I haven't seen anything on it. I haven't messed around with it ever since I found out about that ruling. Um, just because I think that it could potentially be very easy for you to be stuck in a certain situation that's like, ah, man, I can't flip them, I can't do anything. So you're kind of in an awkward spot at that point. Um, so again, initially he was an S tier. I have since bumped him down to a B because at the end of the day, he's also not a unit at all. The draw power is kind of insane. Being able to um, draw on the front side is pretty neat. Heal is pretty neat. And then on the back side, being able to create a clone trooper token and be able to do 2 damage to each base. If you could sit there and consistently keep flipping on each turn, then I think he'd be solid because you'd be healing 2 every other turn, drawing a card every other turn, you'd be creating a clone every other turn. But again, you're only typically going to get 5 or 6 turns before the game's over. So it's like you're not going to be able to get that effective with it. Um, Sadly, because once you exhaust him and then you flip the leader, he stays exhausted. He does not go back into ready. So you can't do a double flip or anything like that. Like once he's exhausted, he's exhausted. So it's a B tier for me. So I like to, everybody's feedback on this tier ranking list, whether you agree, whether you disagree. If you felt something's a little low, I'd like to hear some feedback on it. Maybe there's something that I overlooked, like, Anakin should probably be an S tier, or Captain Rex should be an A, or something like that. I'd appreciate the feedback. But other than that, I hope y'all have enjoyed this ranking video. Sorry the images look a little small and whatnot. But, have a wonderful day. See y'all next time.